I remember the first time I saw the Mariana Trench on a map. It was just a thin, dark line, a scar slashed across the blue skin of the Pacific. But that line, so small, so easy to overlook, hid a world deeper, darker, and more dangerous than anything I could have imagined. I was obsessed. I had to know what was down there. What secrets waited in the blackness, 7 miles beneath the waves. The journey began with a single question: what lives in the deepest place on Earth? Scientists had sent probes, dropped cameras, even sent people down in tiny, reinforced submarines. But every answer only led to more questions. The trench was a place of mystery, a place where the rules of life and death seemed to bend and break. And I wanted to see it for myself. The descent started on a gray morning, the sky heavy with clouds. The research vessel rocked gently in the swell, the crew moving with quiet purpose. I stood at the edge of the deck, staring out at the endless blue, feeling the weight of the ocean pressing down on my chest. I was about to go deeper than any human had ever gone before. My heart pounded with fear and excitement. The submersible was a tiny sphere of titanium and glass, barely big enough for 2 people. Inside, it felt like a coffin. The hatch sealed with a hiss, and suddenly the world outside was gone. Just me, the pilot, and the hum of the engines. We began to sink. At first, there was light. Sunbeams danced through the water, painting the walls of the sub with shifting patterns. Fish darted past, curious and unafraid. But as we dropped deeper, the light faded. The water turned from blue to green to black. The pressure outside grew with every meter, crushing, relentless. I tried not to think about what would happen if the hull failed. We passed 1,000 meters. Then 2,000. The world outside was pitch black now, the only light coming from our own lamps. Strange shapes flickered in the beams, jellyfish with glowing tentacles, ghostly white eels, things with too many eyes and too many teeth. The pilot pointed out a giant amphipod, a shrimp-like creature the size of a football. It drifted past, unbothered by our presence. At 4,000 meters, the trench walls rose up around us, steep and jagged. The rocks were covered in a thin layer of silt, disturbed by our passing. I pressed my face to the glass, searching for movement. Something shifted in the shadows, a flash of silver, a ripple of fins. I caught my breath, but it was gone before I could see what it was. The radio crackled. The surface team checked in, their voices thin and distant. We were alone now, cut off from the world above. The pilot adjusted our course, steering us toward the Challenger Deep, the very bottom of the trench, nearly 11,000 meters down. No one knew what we would find there. As we descended, the temperature dropped. The sub's heaters struggled to keep up. My breath fogged the glass. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from the sense of being watched. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. Every so often, the lights would catch something moving, a fin, a tentacle, a pale, eyeless face. The creatures down here were like nothing I'd ever seen. They were built for survival in a world without light, without warmth, without mercy. We passed 6,000 meters. The pressure outside was over 600 times what it was at the surface. The hull creaked and groaned. I tried to steady my breathing, to focus on the instruments. But my mind kept drifting, imagining what might be lurking just beyond the reach of our lights. Suddenly, the sub lurched. Something had brushed against us, something big. The pilot swore, checking the cameras. For a moment, I saw a shape, long and sinuous, sliding past the window. It was gone before I could process what I'd seen. My heart hammered in my chest. Was it a giant squid? An eel? Or something else, something unknown? We kept going, deeper and deeper. The trench walls closed in, the space growing tighter. The silt swirled in our wake, obscuring the view. The pilot slowed the sub, careful not to stir up too much debris. We were close now, so close I could feel it. At 10,000 meters, the instruments began to pick up strange readings. The water was warmer here, pockets of heat rising from the seafloor. The pilot explained that there were hydrothermal vents nearby, cracks in the Earth's crust where superheated water spewed into the ocean. These vents were home to entire ecosystems, creatures that lived off chemicals instead of sunlight. I stared out the window, searching for signs of life. And then I saw it, a field of tube worms, their bodies pale and ghostly, waving in the current. Crabs scuttled between them, their shells gleaming in the light. Strange fish hovered nearby, their bodies translucent, their eyes huge and unblinking. It was like looking at an alien world. But there was something else, too. Something the pilot didn't want to talk about. He kept glancing at the sonar, his brow furrowed. I asked him what was wrong, but he just shook his head. "There's something down here," he said quietly. "Something big." The tension in the sub was palpable. Every creak, every groan of the hull sounded like a warning. I pressed my hand to the glass, peering into the darkness. The lights flickered, casting long shadows. I thought I saw movement, a shape, massive and slow, gliding just out of sight. The pilot whispered, "Did you see that?" I nodded, my mouth dry. We both stared, waiting, barely breathing. And then, from the darkness, something emerged. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its outline barely visible in the gloom. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the sub's lamps, maybe a drifting cloud of silt. But then it turned, and I saw the glint of eyes. Not one pair, but several, arranged in a line along a long, serpentine head. The creature was enormous, easily longer than our submersible, its body covered in rough, armored plates that shimmered with a faint, bioluminescent glow. The pilot froze, his hands hovering over the controls. I could hear his breath, shallow and quick. The creature circled us, slow and silent, its eyes never leaving the sub. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was no ordinary animal. It was something ancient, something that had survived in the darkness for millions of years, unseen by human eyes. For a moment, it hovered in front of the window, its face inches from the glass. I stared into its eyes, and for a heartbeat, I felt a strange connection, a sense of being studied, measured, weighed. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone, vanishing into the blackness as if it had never been there at all. The pilot let out a shaky laugh, relief and fear mingling in his voice. "Did you get that on camera?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if the footage would capture what we'd just seen. Part of me hoped it wouldn't. Some things, I thought, were better left unseen. We drifted in silence for a while, both of us lost in our thoughts. The trench felt different now, more alive, more dangerous. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every flicker of movement a potential threat. I wondered how many other creatures like that one were out there, watching us from the darkness. The radio crackled again, a burst of static breaking the silence. The surface team was checking in, their voices distant and distorted. The pilot answered, his tone calm but tense. He didn't mention the creature. I understood why. Who would believe us? We continued our descent, the submersible. At 10,800 meters, we reached a plateau, a flat expanse of silt and rock, dotted with hydrothermal vents. The water here was warmer, swirling with clouds of minerals and chemicals. The vents hissed and bubbled, sending plumes of superheated water into the darkness. Around them, life thrived in impossible forms, giant clams, blind shrimp, and colonies of bacteria that glowed with an eerie blue light. I pressed my face to the glass, mesmerized by the scene. It was beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how little we understood about this world. The pilot pointed out a cluster of strange, spindly creatures, long, thin bodies with delicate, feathery appendages. They danced in the current, feeding on the chemicals spewing from the vents. Suddenly, the sonar beeped, a sharp, insistent sound. The pilot frowned, checking the readout. Something was moving beneath us, something big. The display showed a massive shape, rising from the silt. I felt my stomach clench. Was it the same creature as before, or something else entirely? The sub rocked as the shape passed beneath us, stirring up a cloud of debris. For a moment, we were blind, the lights reflecting off swirling particles. I held my breath, waiting for the danger to pass. When the silt finally settled, the shape was gone. The pilot exhaled slowly, his hands trembling. "We need to be careful," he said. "There's more down here than we thought." We moved cautiously, scanning the seafloor for signs of life. The trench was full of surprises, strange tracks in the silt, odd patterns etched into the rocks, and the occasional flash of movement in the shadows. I felt like an intruder, a trespasser in a world that didn't want me there. As we explored, we found evidence of geological activity, cracks in the seafloor, small earthquakes that sent ripples through the water. The pilot explained that the trench was a place of constant change, where the Earth's crust was being pulled apart and pushed together by unimaginable forces. It was a place of creation and destruction, where life and death were locked in an endless struggle. We collected samples, water, silt, small creatures that clung to the rocks. Each one was a mystery, a puzzle waiting to be solved. The pilot joked that we were like kids in a candy store, but I could see the tension in his eyes. He was scared, and so was I. The hours passed in a blur. The darkness outside seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. I started to feel claustrophobic, trapped in the tiny sphere of the sub. Every sound was amplified, the creak of the hull, the hum of the engines, the steady beep of the instruments. I tried to focus on the work, but my mind kept drifting back to the creature we'd seen. Was it still out there, watching us? Or had it moved on, searching for something else to eat? Suddenly, the lights flickered. The sub shuddered, and the instruments went haywire. The pilot cursed, frantically checking the controls. "We've lost power," he said, his voice tight with fear. Switching to backup. For a few terrifying seconds, we were plunged into darkness. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and frantic. Then, with a whine, the backup systems kicked in. The lights came back on, dimmer than before. The pilot looked at me, his face pale. "We need to get out of here," he said. "Now." I nodded, my mouth dry. We started to ascend, the sub rising slowly through the water. But as we climbed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. The ascent felt endless. Every meter we gained, the pressure outside lessened, but the tension inside the sub only grew. The pilot kept glancing at the sonar, his eyes darting nervously over the screen. I tried to steady my breathing, to focus on the slow, upward crawl of the depth gauge. But the sense of being watched was overwhelming, as if something vast and ancient was tracking our every move. The radio crackled again, but this time it was just static. The surface team was out of reach, our voices swallowed by the crushing depths. The only sounds were the hum of the backup engines and the occasional groan of the hull. I pressed my face to the glass, searching the darkness for any sign of movement. Every shadow seemed to shift, every flicker of light a potential threat. Suddenly, the sonar pinged, sharp, insistent, closer than before. The pilot's hands tightened on the controls. "Something's following us," he whispered, barely audible. I stared at the screen. A massive shape was rising from the depths, matching our ascent. It moved with a slow, relentless purpose, never getting closer, but never falling behind. We increased our speed, the engine straining against the weight of the water. The sub vibrated, the metal skin creaking under the stress. I could feel the fear building, a cold knot in my stomach. The pilot tried to reassure me, but his voice was thin, unconvincing. "We'll make it," he said. "We just have to keep moving." As we climbed, the water grew lighter, shifting from pitch black to a deep, inky blue. The pressure eased, but the sense of danger remained. I kept glancing back at the sonar, watching the shape follow us, always just out of sight. I wondered what it wanted. Was it curious, or hungry, or simply defending its territory? The pilot adjusted our course, steering us toward a narrow canyon in the trench wall. "We can lose it in there," he said, his voice tense. The sub slipped into the canyon, the walls closing in around us. The lights cast long, twisted shadows on the rocks, illuminating strange markings, scratches, gouges, patterns that looked almost deliberate. I reached out, tracing the marks with my finger on the glass. They were too regular, too precise to be natural. The pilot noticed, his brow furrowing. "What do you think made those?" he asked. I shook my head, unable to answer. The thought that something down here could carve stone was unsettling. The sonar pinged again, louder this time. The shape was still behind us, moving faster now. The pilot pushed the engines, weaving through the canyon, trying to lose our pursuer. The sub lurched and shuddered, scraping against the rocks. I held my breath, praying the hull would hold. Suddenly, the canyon opened up into a vast chamber, a hidden pocket in the trench wall. The lights revealed a graveyard of bones, massive ribs, skulls, vertebrae, all piled together in a tangled heap. Some were ancient, worn smooth by time, others were fresh, still gleaming in the light. I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever lived down here, it was a predator. The pilot slowed the sub, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice shaking. But before we could move, the sonar screamed, a deafening, continuous tone. The shape was right behind us. I turned, just in time to see it emerge from the darkness. It was even larger than I remembered, its body coiling through the water like a serpent. Its eyes glowed with a cold, alien intelligence. It circled the sub, moving with terrifying speed, its massive jaws opening and closing as if tasting the water. The pilot tried to back away, but the creature lunged, slamming into the hull with a force that rattled my bones. The sub spun, lights flickering, alarms blaring. I was thrown against the wall, pain exploding in my shoulder. The pilot shouted, struggling to regain control. The creature struck again, its jaws scraping against the glass. I stared into its mouth, rows of needle-sharp teeth glinting in the light. For a moment, I thought it would break through, that we would be crushed and swallowed whole. But then, as suddenly as it had attacked, it stopped. It hovered in front of the sub. I felt a strange calm wash over me, a sense of understanding. The creature wasn't just a mindless predator, it was intelligent, aware. It was warning us, telling us to leave. I nodded, whispering a promise to go. The pilot managed to stabilize the sub, guiding us out of the chamber. The creature watched us go, its eyes never leaving the window. As we slipped back into the canyon, it disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. We raced upward, the engine straining, the hull groaning. The sonar was silent now, the shape gone. I slumped in my seat, exhaustion and relief washing over me. The pilot glanced at me, his face pale and drawn. "We're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. As we neared the surface, the water grew lighter, the pressure easing. The radio crackled to life, the surface team's voices breaking through the static. We answered, our voices shaky but alive. The pilot gave our position, requesting immediate recovery. The sub broke the surface, sunlight streaming through the tiny window. I blinked, blinded by the sudden brightness. The crew hauled us aboard, their faces a mix of relief and curiosity. We stumbled out, legs weak, hearts pounding. I looked back at the ocean, the endless blue stretching to the horizon. Somewhere down there, in the darkness, the creature watched and waited. I knew I would never forget its eyes, or the message they carried. We had survived the abyss, but the secrets of the trench were far from revealed. I knew I would return, driven by the same curiosity that had brought me here. But next time, I would be ready. That night, back on the ship, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's eyes staring back at me, cold, ancient, impossibly deep. The hum of the engines, the gentle rocking of the waves, even the distant calls of seabirds did nothing to calm my nerves. I lay in my bunk, replaying every moment of the dive, every detail of the abyss, every second of that encounter. The pilot was the same. I found him on the deck, staring out at the moonlit water, a mug of coffee clutched in his hands. He didn't say much, just nodded when I joined him. We stood in silence, listening to the ocean breathe. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We saw something no one else has ever seen. But who's going to believe us?" I didn't have an answer. The footage from the sub was grainy, distorted by the pressure and the darkness. The creature was little more than a shadow, a blur of movement and light. The scientists on board pored over the data, arguing about what it could be. Some said it was a giant eel, others a new species of deep-sea predator. But none of them could explain the intelligence in its eyes, the sense of warning it had given us. The next morning, the ship's lead scientist called a meeting. We gathered in the cramped mess hall, the air thick with tension. She played the footage on a small screen, pausing at the moment the creature appeared. The room fell silent. Even in the poor quality, the size and shape were unmistakable. The scientist turned to us, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "If this is real," she said, "it changes everything we know about life in the deep ocean." She outlined a plan for a second dive, this time with more equipment, better cameras, stronger lights, reinforced hulls. The team buzzed with nervous energy, eager to return to the trench. But the pilot and I exchanged a look. We remembered the warning in the creature's eyes. We knew the risks. Still, curiosity won out. The next day, we prepared for another descent. The sub was checked and rechecked, every bolt tightened, every system tested. I suited up, my hands shaking as I pulled on the heavy gear. The pilot tried to joke, but his laughter was hollow. We both knew what was waiting for us down there. The descent was faster this time, the sub dropping through the water like a stone. The lights were brighter, cutting through the darkness, revealing more of the trench than I'd ever seen before. The walls were alive with strange creatures, jellyfish that pulsed with electric light, crabs with claws like scissors, fish with jaws that unhinged to swallow prey whole. At 8,000 meters, we passed the canyon where we'd first seen the creature. The graveyard of bones was still there, untouched, silent. I shivered, remembering the way the creature had circled us, the way it had watched. The pilot kept his eyes on the sonar, his hands steady on the controls. We reached the plateau, the field of hydrothermal vents glowing in the darkness. The water shimmered with heat, swirling with clouds of minerals. The pilot maneuvered the sub closer, careful to avoid the jets of boiling water. We collected samples, filmed the strange life forms that clustered around the vents. The scientists on the surface would be thrilled, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sonar was quiet at first, just the usual background noise of the deep. But then, a faint ping, something moving, far below us. The pilot tensed, his eyes narrowing. "It's back," he said, his voice tight. I stared at the screen, watching the shape rise from the depths, slow and deliberate. We held our position, the sub hovering above the vents. The creature appeared, its body coiling through the water, eyes glowing in the light. This time, it didn't attack. It circled us, studying, curious. I felt the same strange connection, the sense of being measured, judged. The pilot spoke softly, almost to himself. "It's not afraid of us. It's interested." I nodded, unable to look away. The creature moved closer, its face inches from the glass. I could see every detail, the rough plates of its skin, the scars that crisscrossed its body, the intelligence in its eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The creature and I stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, separated by inches of glass and millions of years of evolution. I felt a surge of emotion, fear, awe, respect. I raised my hand, pressing it to the window. The creature mirrored the gesture, its massive head tilting in curiosity. Then, without warning, the sonar screamed. Another shape was rising from the depths, larger, faster, more aggressive. The first creature turned, its body tensing. The pilot swore, backing the sub away from the vents. The two shapes collided in the darkness, a blur of movement and violence. The water churned, clouds of silt and debris obscuring the view. The sub rocked, alarms blaring. I caught glimpses of the battle, jaws snapping, tails lashing, flashes of bioluminescent light. The pilot struggled to keep us steady, his hands flying over the controls. Finally, the water cleared. The first creature was gone, vanished into the darkness. The second shape lingered, circling the sub, its eyes cold and predatory. It was even larger than the first, its body covered in scars and wounds. It pressed its face to the glass, studying us with a hunger that made my blood run cold. The pilot didn't wait. He fired the engines, sending the sub rocketing away from the vents. The creature followed, relentless, its massive body blocking our escape. I could see its teeth, rows of jagged fangs, its eyes burning with a terrible intelligence. We dodged and weaved, the sub barely staying ahead. The creature struck, slamming into the hull, denting the metal. I screamed, the sound lost in the roar of the engines. The pilot shouted, pushing the sub to its limits. At last, we broke free, the creature falling behind. We raced upward, the water growing lighter, the pressure easing. The pilot slumped in his seat, sweat pouring down his face. I stared at the sonar, watching the shape disappear into the depths. We had survived again, but the message was clear. The trench was not ours to explore. Its secrets were guarded by monsters, ancient and deadly. Back on the surface, the mood was different. The scientists were ecstatic about the footage and samples, but the crew was uneasy. Word had spread about what we'd seen, about the creatures, the battle, the graveyard of bones. Some of the sailors refused to go near the edge of the deck at night. Others whispered about curses, about ancient guardians of the deep. I couldn't blame them. I felt it too, that sense of trespassing, of having crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The lead scientist called another meeting, this time in the ship's cramped lab. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. She played the new footage, frame by frame, analyzing every detail. The creatures were unlike anything in the scientific record, massive, armored, intelligent. The scars on their bodies told stories of violence, of survival in a world where only the strongest endured. "We're looking at a new apex predator," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Something that's evolved in total isolation, in the most extreme environment on Earth. This could rewrite everything we know about evolution, about the limits of life." But the pilot and I exchanged a glance. We remembered the eyes, the warning, the violence. We knew that some secrets were better left alone. The days passed in a blur of activity. The scientists worked around the clock, analyzing samples, reviewing footage, planning the next dive. The crew grew restless, their nerves fraying. Strange things started happening, equipment malfunctioned, lights flickered, strange noises echoed through the hull at night. Some said it was just the ship settling, the usual creaks and groans of metal and wood. But I wasn't so sure. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my cabin. I got up, heart pounding, and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air was cold, heavy with the scent of salt and something else, something metallic, like blood. I shivered, closing the door and locking it behind me. The next morning, one of the crew was missing. His bunk was empty, his gear untouched. The captain organized a search, but there was no trace, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The crew was terrified. Some demanded to turn back, to leave the trench behind. But the scientists insisted on one more dive. The pilot and I prepared the sub, checking every system, every bolt. We worked in silence, the tension between us thick. I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I felt in my own bones. But curiosity drove us forward. We had to know what was down there, what secrets the trench was hiding. The descent was slower this time, every meter a battle against the weight of the water and the weight of our own fear. The lights cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar walls of the trench, the strange creatures that drifted in the current. But something was different. The water felt heavier, the darkness deeper. At 9,000 meters, the sonar picked up movement, multiple shapes, circling just out of sight. The pilot tensed, his hands white-knuckled on the controls. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The shapes were huge, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. They were waiting for us. We reached the plateau, the field of hydrothermal vents glowing in the darkness. The creatures were there, circling the vents, their bodies coiling through the water. They watched us, their eyes glowing in the light. I felt a chill run down my spine. We were intruders, trespassers in their world. The pilot kept the sub at a distance, careful not to provoke them. We filmed, collected samples, did our best to stay unnoticed. But the creatures were aware of us. They moved closer, their bodies blocking the light, casting long shadows on the seafloor. Suddenly, the sub shuddered. The lights flickered, alarms blared. The pilot cursed, checking the controls. "We're losing power," he said, his voice tight with fear. I stared out the window, watching as the creatures closed in, their eyes cold and unblinking. One of them pressed its face to the glass, its mouth opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. I could see scars on its skin, wounds that had never healed. It stared at me, its eyes filled with a strange intelligence. I felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of understanding. It was warning us, telling us to leave. The pilot fired the engines, trying to break free. The creatures followed, relentless, their bodies slamming into the hull. The sub rocked, alarms blaring, lights flickering. I clung to my seat, praying the hull would hold. At last, we broke free, racing upward through the darkness. The creatures followed for a while, then fell back, disappearing into the blackness. The pilot and I slumped in our seats, exhausted, shaken. We surfaced, the crew hauling us aboard. The scientists rushed to see the footage, their excitement undimmed by our fear. But the crew was silent, their faces pale. Another man was missing, vanished without a trace. That night, the captain called a meeting. He listened to the scientists, to the crew, to the pilot and me. In the end, he made the only decision he could. We would leave the trench, return to port, and report what we had found. As the ship turned away from the abyss, I stood at the rail, staring into the endless blue. I knew I would never forget what I had seen, the creatures, the darkness, the sense of being watched. The trench had changed me, left a mark that would never fade. But even as we sailed away, I knew the story wasn't over. The secrets of the abyss were still out there, waiting to be discovered. And someday, someone would return. The journey back to port was tense and silent. The ship moved through calm waters, but the mood on board was anything but peaceful. The scientists huddled over their data, whispering about new species, evolutionary anomalies, and the possibility of rewriting textbooks. The crew kept to themselves, eyes darting to the horizon, as if expecting something to rise from the depths and follow us home. I spent hours on the deck, staring at the waves, replaying every moment of the dives in my mind. The images haunted me, the graveyard of bones, the scars on the creatures, the intelligence in their eyes. I wondered about the missing crewmen, about what had really happened to them. Had they fallen overboard? Had something come for them in the night? No one spoke of it, but the fear was palpable, a living thing that moved through the ship like a cold wind. The pilot joined me one evening, his face drawn and tired. He leaned on the rail, watching the sun sink below the horizon. "You think we'll ever go back?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not us. But someone will. They always do." He nodded, silent for a long time. "I keep seeing its eyes," he said finally. "That look. Like it was trying to tell us something." I knew exactly what he meant. The warning, the sense of trespass. The creatures weren't just animals, they were guardians, protectors of a world we barely understood. We had crossed a line, and they had let us go. But I wondered what would happen to the next team, the next expedition that dared to enter their domain. When we reached port, the ship was met by a crowd of reporters, scientists, and government officials. The lead scientist gave a statement, careful and measured, describing our discoveries in vague terms. She spoke of new species, of the importance of protecting deep-sea environments, of the need for further research. She didn't mention the missing men, or the attacks, or the sense of danger that had haunted every dive. The footage was sent to labs around the world. Experts pored over every frame, debating what we had seen. Some called it a hoax, a trick of the light. Others insisted it was proof of a new branch of life, a glimpse into an ancient world untouched by time. The debate raged for weeks, but the truth remained elusive. I tried to return to normal life, but the trench haunted me. I dreamed of darkness, of eyes watching from the deep, of voices whispering in the cold. I woke in the night, heart pounding, certain that something was waiting for me just beyond the edge of the bed. I avoided the ocean, unable to face the endless blue without remembering what lay beneath. The pilot fared no better. He quit his job, moved inland, far from the sea. We kept in touch, sharing our nightmares, our fears. We both knew we would never be the same. Months passed. The world moved on, the story of the trench fading from the headlines. But then, late one night, I received a message, a video file, sent from an anonymous address. I hesitated before opening it, my hands shaking. The footage was grainy, shot from a handheld camera. It showed a small boat, drifting over the trench. Voices whispered in the background, excited, nervous. The camera panned to the water, zooming in on a dark shape just below the surface. For a moment, I saw it, the same eyes, the same armored plates, the same sense of ancient intelligence. The video ended abruptly, the screen going black. I sat in the darkness, heart racing. Someone else had gone back. Someone else had seen the creatures. The story wasn't over. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began to investigate. I reached out to contacts in the scientific community, to journalists, to anyone who might know more. Most dismissed me, unwilling to talk about the trench. But a few hinted at new expeditions, at secret research funded by governments and private corporations. The lure of discovery was too strong, the promise of fame and fortune too tempting. I learned of a new team, better equipped, better funded, preparing to return to the abyss. They had new technology, drones, reinforced subs, advanced sensors. They believed they could unlock the secrets of the trench, map its depths, catalog its life. They didn't believe the stories of danger, of missing men, of ancient guardians. They were scientists, explorers, driven by the same curiosity that had brought me to the edge. I tried to warn them. I sent messages, shared my footage, told them about the eyes, the warning, the sense of trespass. Most ignored me. A few thanked me politely, promising to be careful. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. The day of the new expedition arrived. I watched from afar, following the news, tracking the ship's progress. The world watched too, eager for new discoveries, new wonders from the deep. The scientists gave interviews, smiling for the cameras, confident in their technology, their training, their resolve. But as the ship disappeared over the horizon, I felt a chill. I remembered the eyes, the warning, the sense of being watched. I knew what waited for them in the darkness. Days passed with no news. Then, a brief report, a technical malfunction, a delay, nothing serious. But I knew better. I waited, heart pounding, for the next update. Finally, a message from the ship. The expedition had reached the trench, deployed their subs, begun their descent. The scientists were excited, the footage incredible, new species, new landscapes, new mysteries. But then, silence. The feed went dark, the ship stopped responding. The world waited, breathless, for news. I waited too, knowing what had happened. The abyss had claimed them, as it had claimed so many before. The silence stretched on for days. News outlets speculated wildly, technical failure, equipment malfunction, even sabotage. But I knew, deep down, that it was something else. The abyss had a way of swallowing things, of erasing all traces. The ocean kept its secrets well. Then, without warning, a single transmission broke through the static. It was garbled, barely intelligible, but the fear in the voice was unmistakable. "We're not alone, something's down here, it's watching us." The message cut off abruptly, replaced by a low, rumbling sound that sent chills down my spine. The world listened in horror, the mystery of the trench deepening with every unanswered question. The authorities launched a rescue mission, sending ships and aircraft to the last known coordinates. They found the research vessel adrift, empty, the crew gone. The subs were missing, the equipment abandoned. There were no signs of struggle, no clues to what had happened. It was as if the ocean had simply reached up and taken them. The story dominated the headlines for weeks. Experts debated, officials promised investigations, families mourned. But the truth remained hidden, buried beneath miles of water and darkness. The trench had claimed another expedition, and the world was left with only questions. I watched it all unfold from a distance, haunted by memories of my own journey. I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief, guilt for not doing more to warn them, relief that I had survived. But the nightmares returned, more vivid than ever. I dreamed of the abyss, of eyes watching from the darkness, of voices calling to me from the deep. One night, I woke to find my phone buzzing. Another message, another video file. This one was different, clearer, more deliberate. It showed the inside of a submersible, the camera shaking as the operator panned across the control panel. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and outside the window, something moved. A massive shape, armored and sinuous, glided past, its eyes glowing in the dim light. The operator's voice was frantic, desperate. "It's right outside, it's not leaving, we can't get away." The video ended with a jolt, the screen going black. I sat in the darkness, heart pounding, the fear as real as it had been in the trench. I knew then that the creatures were more than just animals. They were guardians, protectors of a world untouched by human hands. They tolerated our presence, up to a point. But when we pushed too far, when we threatened their domain, they responded with violence. The scientific community was divided. Some dismissed the videos as fakes, hoaxes designed to scare and mislead. Others saw them as proof of something extraordinary, evidence of life beyond our understanding. The debate raged on, but the expeditions stopped. No one was willing to risk another disappearance, another tragedy. But the mystery of the trench only grew. Rumors spread of secret research, of governments and corporations conducting experiments in the depths. Some claimed to have seen strange lights in the water, to have heard unearthly sounds echoing through the night. The ocean was alive with secrets, and the world was desperate to uncover them. I became obsessed, spending hours poring over reports, analyzing footage, searching for patterns. I mapped every disappearance, every unexplained event, every sighting of strange creatures. The more I learned, the more I realized how little we truly knew. The trench was not just a place, it was a boundary, a threshold between worlds. On one side, the world of light and air, of humans and machines. On the other, a realm of darkness and pressure, of ancient life and unimaginable danger. We had crossed that boundary, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. One evening, as I sat surrounded by maps and notes, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call, a voice I recognized instantly. The pilot. He sounded shaken, his words rushed and urgent. "I've been having dreams," he said. "Nightmares. The same ones you described. I see the eyes, the darkness. I hear voices, calling me back." I swallowed hard, my own fear mirrored in his voice. "What do you think it means?" He was silent for a moment. I think we're connected to it now. The trench. The creatures. We saw something we weren't supposed to see. And now, it's a part of us. The call ended, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stared at the maps, at the endless blue of the Pacific, and felt a chill run through me. The abyss was calling, and I didn't know if I could resist. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on. I avoided the ocean, kept my distance from anything that reminded me of the trench. But the dreams persisted, growing more vivid, more insistent. I saw the creatures, the graveyard of bones, the endless darkness. I heard the voices, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. One night, I woke to find myself standing at the edge of the water, the waves lapping at my feet. I had no memory of how I got there, no idea how long I had been walking. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and unknowable. I felt a pull, a longing to return, to dive back into the darkness and uncover the secrets that waited below. I turned away, forcing myself to walk back to the safety of land. But I knew it was only a matter of time. The abyss had marked me, claimed a part of my soul. I was no longer just an observer, I was a part of the story, bound to the trench and its mysteries forever. The days blurred together, each one haunted by the same restless energy. I tried to distract myself with work, with friends, with the routines of daily life, but nothing could shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. The ocean was never far from my mind. Every time I saw a map, every time I heard the crash of waves, I felt the pull of the abyss, a gravity that tugged at my thoughts and dreams. I started keeping a journal, trying to make sense of the nightmares. Each entry was a fragment, a flash of memory, a snatch of dialogue, a glimpse of something moving in the dark. I wrote about the eyes, the graveyard of bones, the way the water seemed to press in from all sides. I wrote about the missing men, about the warnings, about the sense of trespass that had followed us from the depths. The pilot called again, his voice even more strained than before. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back down there. I see them. I hear them. It's like they're calling to me." I tried to reassure him, but my own words sounded hollow. I was having the same dreams, the same visions. It was as if the trench had left a mark on us, a scar that would never heal. One night, I received another message, this time from one of the scientists who had been on the original expedition. She sounded frantic, her words tumbling out in a rush. "You have to see this," she said, sending a file. "We missed something. Something important." I opened the file, my hands trembling. It was a series of sonar scans, taken during our last dive. At first, they looked like nothing, just lines and blips, the usual noise of the deep. But as I looked closer, I saw patterns, shapes that didn't belong, structures that seemed too regular, too deliberate to be natural. I zoomed in, enhancing the image. There, hidden in the silt and shadows, was something unmistakable, a structure, massive and ancient, buried deep in the trench wall. It looked like a ruin, a monument, something built by hands or claws or something else entirely. My heart raced. Had we stumbled onto evidence of an ancient civilization, lost to time and pressure and darkness? I called the scientist, my voice shaking. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know. But it's not natural. And it's not alone. There are more, dozens, maybe hundreds, scattered throughout the trench. We only saw a fraction of what's down there." The implications were staggering. If there was a lost civilization in the trench, it would change everything we knew about the history of life on Earth. But it also raised new questions: who built these structures? What happened to them? And were the creatures we'd seen their descendants, or their destroyers? The scientist was desperate to return, to launch a new expedition. But after what had happened to the last team, no one would fund it. The risks were too great, the dangers too real. The trench had claimed too many lives already. Still, the discovery gnawed at me. I spent sleepless nights poring over the scans, tracing the outlines of the ruins, imagining what secrets they might hold. I reached out to experts, archaeologists, marine biologists, geologists, anyone who might have insight. Most dismissed me, unwilling to believe in lost cities at the bottom of the ocean. But a few were intrigued, offering theories and speculation. One suggested that the structures could be natural formations, shaped by geological forces over millions of years. Another argued that they might be the remains of ancient hydrothermal vent communities, built by creatures long extinct. But none could explain the regularity, the symmetry, the sense of purpose in the designs. The pilot was skeptical. "You really think there's a lost city down there?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't stop thinking about it. What if we're not the first intelligent beings to explore the trench? What if something else came before us?" He was silent for a long time. "If that's true, maybe the creatures are protecting something. Maybe that's why they're so aggressive." The idea made a strange kind of sense. The creatures weren't just predators, they were guardians, defending the secrets of the abyss from intruders. We had stumbled onto something ancient, something sacred, and we had paid the price. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became. The trench was more than just a geological feature, it was a tomb, a fortress, a place of memory and warning. The creatures were its sentinels, its keepers, ensuring that the secrets of the deep remained hidden. I became obsessed with the idea, driven by a need to know the truth. I started planning, gathering resources, reaching out to anyone who might help. I knew the risks, knew what had happened to those who had gone before. But the pull of the abyss was too strong. I had to return. The pilot agreed to join me, despite his fear. "If we're going back," he said, "we do it right this time. No shortcuts. No half measures. We prepare for everything." We began assembling a team: scientists, engineers, divers, people who understood the dangers and were willing to face them. We secured funding from a private foundation, one that believed in the value of discovery, no matter the cost. We designed a new submersible, stronger and more advanced than anything that had come before. As the day of departure approached, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The nightmares grew more intense, the voices louder, the pull of the trench almost unbearable. But I knew there was no turning back. The secrets of the abyss were waiting, and I was determined to uncover them no matter what the cost. The new expedition felt different from the start. Every member of the team knew the risks, and every one of us carried the weight of the stories, the warnings, the disappearances. We worked in silence, checking and rechecking every piece of equipment, every line of code, every bolt and seal on the submersible. The air was thick with tension, but also with a sense of purpose. We weren't just explorers, we were witnesses, investigators, maybe even trespassers on sacred ground. The submersible itself was a marvel of engineering. Reinforced titanium hull, redundant life support, state-of-the-art sonar and cameras, robotic arms for collecting samples. It felt safer, more secure, but I knew that nothing could truly protect us from the unknown. The abyss had a way of finding weaknesses, of exploiting fear. The day of the dive dawned gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds. The ocean was calm, a vast mirror reflecting the uncertainty in our hearts. The team gathered on deck, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The pilot stood beside me, his face pale but determined. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, though my hands trembled. "As I'll ever be." We climbed into the sub, the hatch sealing with a hiss. The world outside faded away, replaced by the hum of machinery and the soft glow of instrument panels. The descent began, slow and steady, the pressure building with every meter. I watched the numbers climb: 1,000 meters, 2,000, 3,000, the light fading, the water growing colder and darker. At 5,000 meters, the first signs of life appeared. Strange, translucent creatures drifted past the windows, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescent light. The cameras captured everything, sending the images back to the surface. The scientists on the support ship watched in awe, their voices crackling through the radio. At 7,000 meters, the trench walls rose up around us, steep and jagged. The sonar pinged, mapping the contours of the abyss, searching for the ruins we had seen in the scans. The tension in the sub was palpable. Every shadow seemed to move, every flicker of light a potential threat. At 9,000 meters, we reached the plateau, the field of hydrothermal vents, glowing in the darkness. The water shimmered with heat, swirling with clouds of minerals. The robotic arms reached out, collecting samples, scraping the surface of the vents. The scientists murmured in excitement, their voices tinged with fear. Then, at 10,500 meters, the sonar picked up something new. A structure, massive and regular, buried in the silt. The camera zoomed in, revealing the outline of a wall, a column, a doorway. The ruins were real, ancient, weathered, but unmistakably artificial. The pilot maneuvered the sub closer, careful not to disturb the silt. The lights illuminated carvings on the stone, patterns and symbols, worn by time but still visible. I pressed my face to the glass, heart pounding. The designs were unlike anything I had ever seen: spirals, circles, lines that seemed to pulse with meaning. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if I had seen them before, in dreams or nightmares. The team was silent, awestruck. The lead scientist spoke softly, her voice trembling. This changes everything. We're not alone. We never were. We filmed everything, documenting every detail, every crack and crevice. The robotic arms reached out, brushing away silt, revealing more of the structure. There were statues, half buried, their faces eroded but still haunting. They looked almost human, but not quite: elongated skulls, wide eyes, mouths frozen in expressions of fear or awe. As we explored, the sonar pinged again: movement, just beyond the edge of the lights. The pilot tensed, his hands hovering over the controls. I stared into the darkness, searching for any sign of the creatures. The ruins felt alive, charged with a strange energy. I could almost hear whispers, voices echoing through the water. Suddenly, the sub shuddered. The lights flickered, alarms blared. The pilot cursed, checking the controls. "Something's out there," he said, his voice tight with fear. The cameras swung around, searching the darkness. For a moment, there was nothing, just the endless black, the ruins looming in the gloom. Then, a shape appeared, massive and sinuous, gliding through the water. Its eyes glowed, reflecting the light from the sub. It circled us, slow and deliberate, its body coiling around the ruins. The team was silent, frozen with fear. The creature moved closer, its face inches from the glass. I stared into its eyes, feeling the same connection, the same warning as before. It was guarding the ruins, protecting the secrets of the abyss. The pilot whispered, "We need to leave. Now." But I couldn't move. I was transfixed, caught in the creature's gaze. I felt its thoughts, its memories, flashes of ancient battles, of cities lost to the sea, of a world before humans. The ruins were a tomb, a warning, a memory of a time when the abyss was ruled by something else. The creature pressed its face to the glass, its eyes filled with sorrow and rage. I felt a surge of emotion, fear, awe, grief. It was mourning, remembering, warning us to stay away. The pilot broke the spell, firing the engines, pulling the sub away from the ruins. The creature followed, its body blocking our escape. The alarms blared, the lights flickered, the pressure mounting. Then, just as suddenly, the creature stopped. It hovered in the water, watching us, its eyes filled with a terrible wisdom. I felt its message, clear and unmistakable: leave, and never return. We raced upward, the sub shaking, the ruins fading into the darkness. The creature watched us go, its eyes burning in the gloom. When we surfaced, the team was silent, shaken. The scientists were ecstatic about the footage, the ruins, the proof of ancient life. But I knew the truth. The abyss was not just a place of mystery, it was a place of warning, a place where the past and present collided, where secrets were guarded by monsters older than time. The days after our return were a blur of debriefings, interviews, and endless analysis. The footage of the ruins and the creature spread quickly through the scientific community, igniting a firestorm of debate. Some hailed it as the greatest discovery of the century, a lost civilization, evidence of intelligence in the deep, proof that humanity was not the first to build, to dream, to fall. Others dismissed it as a trick of the light, a misinterpretation, a case of wishful thinking fueled by fear and exhaustion. But for those of us who had been there, who had seen the ruins and looked into the eyes of the Guardian, there was no doubt. The abyss was alive with secrets, and we had only scratched the surface. The lead scientist became a celebrity overnight, her face splashed across news outlets and documentaries. She spoke passionately about the need to protect the trench, to study it with respect and caution. She warned of the dangers, the disappearances, the sense of trespass that haunted every expedition. But her words were often drowned out by the clamor for more dives, more footage, more answers. The private foundation that had funded our mission was eager to capitalize on the discovery. They pushed for another expedition, this time with a larger team, more subs, more technology. They wanted to excavate the ruins, to bring artifacts to the surface, to unlock the secrets of the abyss for the world to see. I felt a growing sense of dread. The warnings were clear: the creatures, the ruins, the sense of being watched. We had been allowed to leave, but I doubted we would be so lucky a second time. The pilot agreed, his nightmares growing worse with each passing night. He called me often, his voice tight with fear. "We're pushing too far," he said. "We're not meant to be down there." But the momentum was unstoppable. The world was hungry for answers, for proof, for the thrill of discovery. The new expedition was announced with great fanfare, a media spectacle that drew attention from around the globe. The team was larger, the subs more advanced, the mission more ambitious. They planned to spend weeks in the trench, mapping the ruins, collecting samples, searching for more evidence of ancient life. I was invited to join, but I refused. The memories were too raw, the fear too real. I tried to warn them, to share what I had seen, what I had felt. Some listened, nodding politely, but most dismissed my concerns as superstition, the ramblings of someone traumatized by the unknown. The day the new expedition launched, I watched from the shore, heart heavy with dread. The ships disappeared over the horizon, swallowed by the endless blue. I waited, breathless, for news. At first, everything went according to plan. The subs descended, the cameras rolled, the scientists marveled at the ruins. They found new structures, new carvings, new evidence of a civilization lost to time. The world watched in awe as the footage streamed live, the mysteries of the abyss unfolding in real time. But then, the reports grew strange. Equipment malfunctioned, lights flickered, strange noises echoed through the water. The subs reported shadows moving in the darkness, shapes too large to be explained. The scientists grew uneasy, their voices tinged with fear. One night, the feed went dark. The world waited, breathless, for news. Hours passed, then days. The rescue teams found the ships adrift, the subs missing, the crew gone. There were no signs of struggle, no clues to what had happened. It was as if the ocean had simply swallowed them whole. The story dominated the headlines, the world gripped by fear and fascination. Theories abounded, giant squids, underwater earthquakes, sabotage. But those of us who had been there knew the truth. The abyss had claimed another expedition, its secrets safe for now. I tried to move on, to put the trench behind me. But the dreams persisted, growing more vivid, more insistent. I saw the ruins, the creatures, the endless darkness. I heard the voices, whispering warnings I could not understand. One night, I woke to find myself standing at the edge of the water, the waves lapping at my feet. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and unknowable. I felt the pull of the abyss, stronger than ever. I knew I could not resist forever. The pilot called, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It's calling to us," he said. "We're a part of it now." I didn't argue. I knew he was right. The abyss had marked us, claimed us as its own. We were no longer just observers, we were a part of the story, bound to the trench and its mysteries forever. The world moved on, the story of the trench fading from the headlines. But for those of us who had been there, who had seen the ruins and looked into the eyes of the guardian, the abyss was always with us. It haunted our dreams, our thoughts, our lives. And somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the creatures watched and waited, guarding their secrets, their memories, their warnings. The abyss was patient. It knew that, sooner or later, someone would return. I tried to rebuild my life, to find comfort in the ordinary. But the world above felt thin, insubstantial, as if I were living in a dream from which I might wake at any moment, back in the cold, crushing dark. I took long walks along the shore, listening to the waves, feeling the salt air on my skin. Sometimes, I would catch myself staring out at the horizon, searching for something I couldn't name. The pilot and I spoke less often, our conversations growing shorter, more strained. He confessed that he was seeing things, shadows in the corners of his vision, shapes moving beneath the surface of lakes and rivers. "It's like the abyss is following me," he said once, his voice trembling. "Like it's inside me now." I understood. I felt it too. The trench had left its mark, a scar that ran deeper than flesh. I dreamed of the ruins, of the creatures, of the endless, silent dark. Sometimes, I would wake with the taste of salt in my mouth, my heart pounding, certain that I was drowning. The scientific community was still in turmoil. The footage of the ruins and the creatures had sparked a revolution in marine biology, archaeology, and even philosophy. New theories sprang up like weeds, some plausible, others wild and fantastical. Was the trench the cradle of an ancient civilization, lost to time and pressure? Were the creatures the last survivors of a forgotten age, or something even older, something that had never known the light? A few researchers became obsessed, risking their careers and reputations to chase the secrets of the abyss. They published papers, gave lectures, appeared on talk shows, always with the same message: the ocean was not just a place, but a memory, a living record of everything that had ever been. The ruins were proof, they argued, that intelligence had risen and fallen before, and might do so again. But most people moved on. The world was full of mysteries, and the trench was just one more, soon to be replaced by the next sensation. The expedition stopped, the funding dried up, and the abyss returned to silence. I tried to let it go, to bury the memories beneath layers of routine and denial. But the dreams would not let me rest. They grew more vivid, more insistent, until I could no longer tell where memory ended and nightmare began. One night, I dreamed I was back in the sub, descending through the darkness. The lights flickered, the hull groaned, and outside the window, the ruins loomed, larger and more menacing than ever. The creatures circled, their eyes glowing with a cold, ancient intelligence. I felt their thoughts, their memories, flashes of a world before humans, of cities built and destroyed, of wars fought in silence and shadow. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the taste of salt thick on my tongue. I knew then that I could not escape. The abyss was a part of me now, a shadow that would follow me to the end of my days. Desperate for answers, I reached out to the scientist who had first discovered the ruins in the sonar scans. She was living in isolation, far from the sea, her work shunned by the mainstream. When I called, she answered on the first ring, her voice brittle but eager. "I can't stop thinking about it," she confessed. "The patterns, the symbols, they're everywhere. Not just in the trench, but in other deep places, other forgotten corners of the world. It's like a language, a warning written in stone and silence." We talked for hours, sharing theories, fears, and dreams. She believed that the ruins were part of a network, a web of memory stretching across the planet. The creatures were its guardians, its sentinels, ensuring that the secrets of the deep remained hidden. But why? I asked. What are they protecting? What are they afraid of? She hesitated. Maybe it's not fear. Maybe it's grief. Maybe they remember what happened the last time the world changed, the last time something rose from the deep. Her words haunted me. I began to see the patterns everywhere, in the shapes of clouds, in the cracks of pavement, in the way the waves broke on the shore. The world felt thinner, more fragile, as if the boundary between past and present, between surface and abyss, was wearing away. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, I saw something move in the water, a flash of silver, a ripple of scales, a pair of eyes watching from the deep. I froze, heart pounding, unable to look away. The creature lingered for a moment, then vanished, leaving only a swirl of foam in its wake. I knew then that the abyss was not finished with me. The secrets of the trench were still out there, waiting to be uncovered. And I was still a part of the story, whether I wanted to be or not. The pilot called me one last time. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I'm going back," he said. "I have to know. I have to see it one more time." I tried to stop him, to remind him of the dangers, the warnings, the disappearances. But he had already made up his mind. "It's calling to me," he said. "I can't ignore it anymore." The line went dead, and I knew I would never see him again. I stood on the shore that night, watching the waves, listening to the distant call of the abyss. I felt the pull, the longing, the fear. I knew that someday, I would return too. The secrets of the deep were not meant to be forgotten. They were a part of us, written in our bones, waiting to be remembered. The days after the pilot's final call passed in a haze. I found myself drifting through life, haunted by memories and questions that refused to fade. I checked the news obsessively, searching for any mention of a missing sub, a lost ship, a strange sighting at sea. But there was nothing, just silence, as if the ocean had swallowed him whole, erasing every trace. I tried to convince myself that he had changed his mind, that he was safe somewhere far from the water. But deep down, I knew the truth. The abyss had called, and he had answered. I wondered what he had seen in those final moments, if he had found the answers he was searching for, or if he had simply become another secret, another memory lost to the deep. The scientist and I kept in touch, our conversations growing more urgent as the months passed. She sent me new scans, new data, new theories. The patterns in the ruins, she believed, were not just warnings, they were instructions, a guide for those who dared to listen. She spoke of cycles, of civilizations rising and falling, of guardians who watched and waited for the right moment to intervene. I became obsessed with the idea. I spent sleepless nights poring over her notes, tracing the symbols, searching for meaning in the chaos. I began to see connections everywhere, in ancient myths, in forgotten languages, in the stories of sailors and explorers who had vanished without a trace. The world was full of echoes, of memories that refused to die. One night, I dreamed of the trench again. This time, I was alone, drifting through the ruins, the water cold and silent around me. The carvings on the walls glowed with a faint, blue light, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I reached out, tracing the symbols with my fingers, feeling a surge of understanding, a sense that I was close to something important, something that could change everything. But then the darkness closed in, and I felt the presence of the creatures, watching, waiting. I woke with a start, my heart racing, the taste of salt thick on my tongue. I knew I was running out of time. Driven by a sense of urgency I couldn't explain, I began to prepare for my own return to the trench. I reached out to the scientist, to the few remaining members of the original team, to anyone who might help. Most refused, too afraid or too scarred by what they had seen. But a handful agreed, drawn by the same curiosity, the same need for answers. We worked in secret, gathering equipment, securing funding, planning every detail. The world had moved on, but we had not. The abyss still called to us, its secrets burning in our minds. The new submersible was smaller, built for stealth and speed rather than comfort. We outfitted it with the best technology we could find, high-resolution cameras, advanced sonar, reinforced hulls. We trained for months, running simulations, preparing for every possible scenario. But nothing could truly prepare us for what waited in the deep. The night before the dive, I stood on the deck, staring out at the endless black of the ocean. The scientist joined me, her face pale in the moonlight. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I nodded, though fear twisted in my gut. "I have to know." "We all do." She squeezed my hand, her grip cold and trembling. "If we don't come back." "We will," I said, forcing a smile. "We have to." The descent was faster than I remembered, the sub dropping through the water like a stone. The lights faded, the pressure built, and soon we were surrounded by darkness so complete it felt like a living thing. The only sounds were the hum of the engines and the steady beep of the instruments. At 7,000 meters, the first signs of life appeared, strange, glowing creatures drifting past the windows, their bodies pulsing with light. The cameras captured everything, sending the images back to the surface. The scientist watched in awe, her fear forgotten in the face of discovery. At 9,000 meters, the trench walls rose up around us, steep and jagged. The sonar pinged, mapping the contours of the abyss, searching for the ruins. The tension in the sub was palpable. Every shadow seemed to move, every flicker of light a potential threat. At 10,500 meters, we found the ruins. The lights illuminated the carvings, the statues, the doorways. The patterns glowed faintly, as if responding to our presence. The scientist gasped, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's real. It's all real." We moved closer, the cameras recording every detail. The robotic arms reached out, brushing away silt, revealing more of the structure. The symbols were clearer now, their meaning just out of reach. I felt a surge of hope, a sense that we were on the verge of a breakthrough. But then, the sonar screamed, a massive shape rising from the depths, moving faster than anything we had seen before. The creature appeared, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient intelligence. It circled the sub, its body coiling around the ruins, blocking our escape. The scientist froze, her eyes wide with fear. "It's warning us," she whispered. "We're too close." I tried to back away, but the creature pressed closer, its face inches from the glass. I felt its thoughts, its memories, flashes of war, of loss, of a world destroyed by curiosity and greed. The message was clear, some secrets were not meant to be uncovered. The scientist reached out, her hand trembling. "We have to go. Now." I fired the engines, pulling the sub away from the ruins. The creature followed, its eyes never leaving us. The pressure mounted, the alarms blared, and for a moment, I thought we would be crushed. But then, the creature stopped. It hovered in the water, watching us, its eyes filled with sorrow and warning. I felt its message, clear and unmistakable: leave, and never return. We raced upward, the ruins fading into the darkness, the creature watching us go. When we surfaced, the world was unchanged, but we were not. The secrets of the abyss were still out there, waiting, and I knew that someday, someone would return. The days after our return were filled with a strange, heavy silence. The scientist and I barely spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts, haunted by what we had seen and what we had felt. The footage we brought back was clearer than ever, crisp images of the ruins, the carvings, the statues, and the creature itself, its eyes burning with that same ancient intelligence. But as we reviewed the recordings, it became clear that the most important things, the warnings, the emotions, the sense of connection, could never be captured on film. We submitted our findings to the scientific community, but the response was mixed. Some hailed our discoveries as proof of a lost civilization, evidence that the deep ocean was home to secrets beyond our wildest dreams. Others dismissed our claims, insisting that the ruins were natural formations, the creatures just another example of deep-sea gigantism. The debate raged on, but the truth felt further away than ever. The scientist withdrew from public life, retreating to a small house far from the sea. She sent me occasional messages, fragments of dreams, sketches of symbols, theories about the cycles of rise and fall, of memory and forgetting. She seemed to be searching for something, some final piece of the puzzle that would make sense of it all. I tried to return to normal, but the world above felt thin and insubstantial. I found myself wandering the coastline at night, listening to the waves, feeling the pull of the abyss. Sometimes, I would see flashes of movement in the water, a ripple, a glint of scales, a pair of eyes watching from the deep. I knew the creatures were still there, guarding their secrets, waiting for the next intruder. The nightmares returned, more vivid than ever. I dreamed of the ruins, of the carvings glowing with blue light, of the creatures circling in the darkness. I saw flashes of memory, cities rising and falling, wars fought in silence, civilizations lost to time and water. I woke each morning with the taste of salt on my tongue, my heart pounding, certain that I was drowning. One night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a video file, shaky and grainy, shot from the deck of a small boat. The camera panned across the water, focusing on a dark shape just below the surface. For a moment, I saw it, the same eyes, the same armored plates, the same sense of ancient intelligence. The video ended abruptly, the screen going black. I sat in the darkness, heart racing. Someone else had gone back. Someone else had seen the creatures. The story wasn't over. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began to investigate. I reached out to contacts in the scientific community, to journalists, to anyone who might know more. Most dismissed me, unwilling to talk about the trench. But a few hinted at new expeditions, at secret research funded by governments and private corporations. The lure of discovery was too strong, the promise of fame and fortune too tempting. I learned of a new team, better equipped, better funded, preparing to return to the abyss. They had new technology, drones, reinforced subs, advanced sensors. They believed they could unlock the secrets of the trench, map its depths, catalog its life. They didn't believe the stories of danger, of missing men, of ancient guardians. They were scientists, explorers, driven by the same curiosity that had brought me to the edge. I tried to warn them. I sent messages, shared my footage, told them about the eyes, the warning, the sense of trespass. Most ignored me. A few thanked me politely, promising to be careful. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. The day of the new expedition arrived. I watched from afar, following the news, tracking the ship's progress. The world watched too, eager for new discoveries, new wonders from the deep. The scientists gave interviews, smiling for the cameras, confident in their technology, their training, their resolve. But as the ship disappeared over the horizon, I felt a chill. I remembered the eyes, the warning, the sense of being watched. I knew what waited for them in the darkness. Days passed with no news. Then, a brief report, a technical malfunction, a delay, nothing serious. But I knew better. I waited, heart pounding, for the next update. Finally, a message from the ship. The expedition had reached the trench, deployed their subs, begun their descent. The scientists were excited, the footage incredible, new species, new landscapes, new mysteries. But then, silence. The feed went dark, the ship stopped responding. The world waited, breathless, for news. I waited too, knowing what had happened. The abyss had claimed them, as it had claimed so many before. The headlines screamed of disaster, of tragedy, of the dangers of the deep. Experts speculated about equipment failure, about pressure, about the unpredictable nature of the ocean. But I knew the truth. The creatures were still there, still watching, still guarding their secrets. I stood on the shore, staring out at the endless blue, feeling the pull of the abyss. I knew that someday, someone would return. The cycle would begin again, curiosity, discovery, warning, loss. The trench would keep its secrets, and the world above would move on, forgetting, until the next time. But I would not forget. I could not. The abyss was a part of me now, a shadow that would follow me to the end of my days. The world above the waves spun on, oblivious to the secrets lurking in the darkness below. News of the vanished expedition faded, replaced by new headlines, new distractions. But for those of us who had glimpsed the abyss, life would never be the same. I found myself haunted by memories, by dreams that felt more real than waking life. The ocean was always there, just beyond the edge of my vision, calling to me with a voice I could not ignore. I tried to fill my days with routine, work, errands, conversations with friends who could never understand the weight I carried. But every night, as I lay in bed, the dreams returned. I saw the ruins, the carvings, the creatures circling in the dark. I felt the pressure of the water, the cold, the silence. Sometimes, I woke gasping for air, convinced I was still trapped in the sub, still sinking, still being watched. The scientist reached out to me again, her messages more frantic than before. She had been studying the symbols, the patterns, the cycles of rise and fall. "It's all connected," she wrote. "The trench, the ruins, the creatures. They're not just guardians, they're a warning. A memory of what happens when curiosity goes too far." Her words echoed in my mind. I began to see the patterns everywhere, in the stories of lost cities, in the myths of sea monsters, in the warnings whispered by sailors and fishermen. The world was full of reminders, if you knew where to look. But most people didn't want to see. It was easier to believe in the safety of the surface, to pretend that the darkness below was empty, harmless, waiting to be conquered. I started to write, pouring my memories onto the page. I described the descent, the ruins, the creatures, the sense of trespass that haunted every moment. I wrote about the missing men, the warnings, the dreams. I wrote about the pull of the abyss, the way it had changed me, marked me, made me a part of its story. The words came easily, as if I were channeling something older, deeper, than myself. The scientist encouraged me, sending her own notes, her own dreams. She believed that sharing our experiences was the only way to break the cycle, to warn others before it was too late. "The abyss is patient," she wrote. "It waits for us to forget. But if enough people remember, maybe we can change the ending." I wasn't sure I believed her, but I kept writing. The story spread, first among friends, then to strangers online. Some dismissed it as fiction, a ghost story for the digital age. Others believed, or wanted to believe, drawn by the same curiosity that had led me to the edge. A few reached out, sharing their own stories, strange sightings at sea, dreams of darkness, memories that didn't belong to them. The community grew, a small network of believers, dreamers, survivors. We shared information, theories, warnings. We watched the news, tracked new expeditions, tried to piece together the puzzle of the trench. But the more we learned, the more we realized how little we truly knew. One night, I received a message from a sailor stationed on a research vessel near the trench. He described strange lights in the water, equipment that failed for no reason, a sense of being watched that never went away. Sometimes, at night, I hear voices, he wrote. They're not speaking any language I know, but I understand them all the same. They're telling me to leave, to forget, to never come back. His words sent a chill through me. I shared them with the scientist, who responded with a single line, "The Guardians are still watching." The dreams grew more intense. I saw the ruins in greater detail, the carvings glowing with blue light, the creatures circling in silence. I felt their thoughts, their memories, flashes of a world before humans, of cities built and destroyed, of wars fought in darkness. I woke each morning with the sense that I was carrying someone else's memories, someone else's grief. I began to wonder if the abyss was more than just a place. Maybe it was a consciousness, a memory, a living record of everything that had ever been lost. Maybe the creatures were not just guardians, but messengers, trying to warn us of dangers we could not understand. The scientist proposed a new theory. What if the trench is a kind of library, she asked. A place where the memories of lost civilizations are stored, guarded by creatures who remember everything. Maybe that's why they react so strongly to intruders. They're protecting the past, making sure we don't repeat the same mistakes. The idea made a strange kind of sense. I thought of the carvings, the patterns, the cycles of rise and fall. I thought of the warnings, the disappearances, the sense of trespass that haunted every expedition. The abyss was not just a place of danger, it was a place of memory, a place where the past and present collided, where the future was shaped by what we chose to remember or forget. I knew I would never return to the trench. The pull was still there, the curiosity, the longing for answers. But I had seen enough, learned enough, to know that some secrets were better left undisturbed. The abyss would keep its memories, its guardians, its warnings. And I would do my best to remember, to share the story, to make sure that the next time someone stood at the edge, they would know what waited in the darkness below. As the years passed, the world's attention drifted away from the trench. New discoveries, new crises, new wonders took center stage. But for those of us who had been touched by the abyss, the memories never faded. The community of survivors and believers grew slowly, quietly, bound together by dreams and stories that no one else wanted to hear. I kept writing, sharing what I knew, what I remembered. Sometimes, I would receive messages from people who had never seen the ocean, who lived thousands of miles from the nearest shore, but who dreamed of darkness, of ruins, of eyes watching from the deep. The abyss, it seemed, had a way of reaching out, of calling to those who were willing to listen. The scientist continued her research, piecing together fragments of myth and memory, searching for patterns in the chaos. She published papers under a pseudonym, careful to avoid the ridicule of her peers. Her theories grew more elaborate, more daring. She spoke of cycles of extinction and rebirth, of civilizations rising and falling in the shadows of the deep. She believed that the trench was not unique, that there were other places, other abysses, scattered across the planet, each with its own guardians, its own secrets. We met occasionally, always in quiet places far from the sea. Our conversations were long and intense, filled with speculation and fear. We talked about the pilot, about the missing men, about the possibility that the abyss was not just a place, but a force, a will, a memory, a warning written in water and stone. One evening, as we sat in a small cafe, she showed me a new set of scans. They were from a different trench, halfway around the world, but the patterns were the same: ruins, carvings, signs of intelligence lost to time. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "We're just starting to see the edges of something much bigger." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. If the abyss was everywhere, if the Guardians watched from every deep place on Earth, then the story was far from over. Humanity was not alone, not the first, not the last. We were part of a cycle, a pattern that stretched back into the darkness and forward into the unknown. The dreams changed, growing more complex, more urgent. I saw not just the trench, but other places: vast underwater cities, forests of stone, rivers of light flowing through the darkness. I saw creatures of every shape and size, some familiar, some utterly alien, all moving with purpose, all watching, all remembering. Sometimes, I would wake with a sense of peace, as if I had been given a glimpse of something beautiful, something eternal. Other times, I woke in terror, certain that the abyss was rising, that the Guardians were coming for me, for all of us. The community of believers grew bolder, sharing their stories more openly, connecting with others who had seen or felt the same things. We became a network, a web of memory and warning, trying to piece together the truth before it was too late. One day, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a small stone, smooth and black, carved with the same patterns I had seen in the ruins. There was no note, no return address, just the stone and a sense of weight, of history, of warning. I placed it on my desk, unable to look away. It felt like a message, a reminder that the abyss was always watching, always waiting. The scientist called me that night, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "They're reaching out," she said. "The Guardians. They want us to remember. They want us to understand." I wasn't sure what to believe. The line between reality and dream, between memory and imagination, had grown thin. But I knew that the story was not over, that the abyss still had secrets to share. I began to notice changes in the world around me. The ocean seemed wilder, more unpredictable. Storms grew stronger, tides higher, strange creatures washing up on distant shores. Scientists struggled to explain the changes, blaming climate, pollution, chance. But I wondered if the Guardians were stirring, if the memories of the deep were rising to the surface. The community debated what to do. Some wanted to warn the world, to shout the truth from the rooftops. Others argued for caution, for secrecy, fearing what might happen if the wrong people learned of the abyss and its guardians. I found myself torn, caught between the need to share and the fear of what might be unleashed. In the end, I chose to keep writing, to share the story in the only way I knew how. I wrote of the trench, of the ruins, of the creatures and their warnings. I wrote of the cycles, the patterns, the memories that refused to die. I wrote for those who would listen, for those who dreamed of darkness, for those who felt the pull of the abyss. And always, I remembered the eyes, the cold, ancient intelligence, the sorrow, the warning. I knew that the Guardians were still watching, still waiting, still guarding the secrets of the deep. The stone sat on my desk for weeks, a silent reminder of everything I'd seen and everything I still didn't understand. Sometimes, late at night, I would trace the carvings with my fingers, feeling the grooves and ridges, trying to decipher their meaning. The pattern seemed to shift in the dim light, forming new shapes, new symbols, as if the stone itself was alive, whispering secrets only the abyss could know. I started to dream of the stone. In my sleep, it grew larger, transforming into a doorway, a portal to the world beneath the waves. I would step through and find myself drifting through the ruins, the carvings glowing with blue light, the guardians circling in the darkness. Their eyes followed me, filled with sorrow and warning, but also with a strange kind of hope. It was as if they were waiting for me to understand, to remember something I had forgotten. The scientist and I spoke often, our conversations growing more philosophical, more speculative. She believed the stone was a message, a key to unlocking the memories of the deep. "Maybe it's not just a warning," she said one night. "Maybe it's an invitation. Maybe the guardians want us to learn from the past, to avoid making the same mistakes." Her words echoed in my mind. I began to study the stone more closely, comparing its patterns to the carvings in the ruins, to the symbols in ancient texts, to the shapes I saw in my dreams. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, a story of rise and fall, of creation and destruction, of civilizations lost to time and water. The guardians were not just protectors, they were witnesses, chroniclers of a history too vast and terrible for any one mind to hold. I wrote down everything I discovered, filling notebooks with sketches, translations, theories. The process was exhausting, but also exhilarating. For the first time since my return, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense that I was part of something larger than myself. The community of believers grew more active, sharing their own discoveries, their own stones, their own dreams. Some had found similar artifacts, carved shells, pieces of coral, fragments of bone, all marked with the same patterns, the same language of the deep. We compared notes, piecing together the story one fragment at a time. But not everyone was pleased by our progress. Strange things began to happen: messages deleted, files corrupted, packages lost in the mail. Some members of the community reported being followed, watched by strangers who never spoke, who vanished when confronted. The scientist received threats, warnings to stop her research, to forget what she had learned. We grew cautious, communicating in code, meeting only in secret. The sense of danger was real, but so was the sense of discovery. We were close to something important, something that could change the way humanity saw itself and its place in the world. One night, I dreamed of the pilot. He stood at the edge of the ruins, the stone in his hand, his eyes filled with sadness. "You have to remember," he said. "You have to warn them. The cycle is starting again." I woke with a start, the words ringing in my ears. I knew what I had to do. I gathered my notes, my sketches, my translations, and began to write in earnest. I told the story of the trench, of the ruins, of the guardians and their warnings. I wrote of the cycles, the patterns, the memories that refused to die. I wrote for those who would listen, for those who dreamed of darkness, for those who felt the pull of the abyss. The story spread, first among the community, then to a wider audience. Some dismissed it as fiction, a modern myth for a world hungry for mystery. Others believed, drawn by the same curiosity, the same sense of wonder and fear. The debate raged on, but the truth was out there, waiting to be discovered. The scientist published her findings, risking her career and reputation. Her work was met with skepticism, ridicule, even hostility. But a few listened, a few understood. The world was changing, the boundaries between past and present, between surface and abyss, growing thinner every day. Storms battered the coasts, strange creatures washed up on distant shores, the ocean growing wilder, more unpredictable. The guardians were stirring, their memories rising to the surface, their warnings growing louder. One evening, as I walked along the shore, I saw something move in the water, a flash of silver, a ripple of scales, a pair of eyes watching from the deep. I felt no fear, only a sense of recognition, of connection. The abyss was not just a place of danger, but a place of memory, of possibility, of hope. I knew then that the story was not over. The cycle would continue, the guardians would watch, the memories would endure. And I would do my part to remember, to warn, to share the secrets of the deep with those who were willing to listen. The stone remained on my desk, a silent witness to everything I had seen and everything I had learned. Its patterns glowed faintly in the moonlight, a reminder that the abyss was always there, waiting, watching, remembering. The world outside seemed to grow stranger with every passing season. Reports of odd phenomena at sea became more frequent, ships vanishing without a trace, sonar picking up impossible echoes, fishermen telling tales of monstrous shadows beneath their boats. The media dismissed most of it as superstition or the result of climate change, but those of us who knew the truth recognized the signs. The guardians were restless. The cycle was shifting. The scientist and I became more cautious, but also more determined. We organized our community, creating encrypted channels for sharing information, mapping sightings, and tracking patterns. The network grew, connecting people from every continent, all drawn together by dreams, memories, and the unshakable sense that something was coming. One night, I received a message from a contact in the South Pacific. He had been diving near a newly discovered trench when he found a series of carvings on a submerged cliff, patterns identical to those on my stone. He sent photos, shaky and blurred, but unmistakable. The same spirals, the same lines, the same language of the deep. "It's everywhere," he wrote. "We're only beginning to see how much we've forgotten." The scientist was electrified by the discovery. She cross-referenced the carvings with ancient myths from island cultures, finding echoes of the same story, of guardians, of lost cities, of warnings from the sea. "It's a global memory," she said. "A story written in water and stone, passed down through dreams and fear." I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. The more we learned, the more I realized how little we understood. The guardians were not just protectors of the trench, they were keepers of history, of memory, of the lessons humanity had failed to heed time and again. The dreams intensified. I saw the world as it had been, vast continents now drowned, cities swallowed by the sea, creatures older than time itself moving through forests of coral and stone. I saw the rise and fall of civilizations, each one reaching for the light, each one brought low by its own hubris. The guardians watched it all, silent and sorrowful, their eyes filled with the weight of endless memory. Sometimes, I would wake with tears on my face, mourning worlds I had never known. Other times, I woke with a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, this time, things could be different. Maybe, if enough people remembered, if enough people listened, the cycle could be broken. The community debated what to do with our knowledge. Some wanted to go public, to force the world to confront the truth. Others argued for secrecy, fearing what might happen if the guardians were provoked, if the ruins were plundered, if the cycle was accelerated by human greed. I found myself torn, caught between the need to warn and the fear of what might be unleashed. The scientist urged caution. "We're not ready," she said. "The world isn't ready. We have to wait, to watch, to learn. The guardians will show us when the time is right." I trusted her judgment, but the sense of urgency grew with every new report, every new dream. The ocean was changing, the boundaries between past and present, between memory and reality, growing thinner by the day. One evening, as a storm raged outside, I sat at my desk, the stone glowing faintly in the darkness. I felt a presence in the room, a sense of being watched, not with malice, but with patience, with hope. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the memories wash over me, the rise and fall, the warnings, the sorrow, the possibility of redemption. I began to write again, this time not just for myself, but for the world. I wrote of the guardians, of the cycles, of the need to remember. I wrote of the hope that, this time, we might learn, might change, might break free from the endless repetition of history. The story spread, carried by word of mouth, by whispers, by dreams. More people came forward, sharing their own memories, their own stones, their own encounters with the deep. The network grew stronger, more resilient, a web of memory and warning stretching across the globe. The scientist and I met one last time, on a windswept cliff overlooking the sea. We spoke of the future, of the choices humanity would have to make, of the hope that our warnings would be heeded. She pressed a second stone into my hand, its patterns different but familiar, a new chapter in the story of the abyss. Remember, she said. And help others remember. That's all we can do. I promised her I would. As I watched her walk away, disappearing into the mist, I felt the weight of the stones in my pocket, the weight of memory, of warning, of hope. The ocean roared below, wild and untamed, the guardians watching from the depths. The cycle was not yet broken, but the story was not over. There was still time to remember, to change, to choose a different path. The seasons turned, and the world seemed to teeter on the edge of something vast and unseen. Storms battered the coasts with increasing fury, and the ocean's moods grew more unpredictable. Reports of strange phenomena multiplied, unexplained lights beneath the waves, entire pods of whales vanishing, ships encountering walls of fog that swallowed them whole. The media spun stories of climate change and natural disaster, but those of us who knew the truth recognized the signs. The guardians were stirring, and the memories of the deep were rising closer to the surface. I spent more time by the sea, drawn to the restless horizon. Sometimes, I would walk for hours, the stones in my pocket heavy with meaning. I watched the tides, listened to the wind, and tried to decipher the messages hidden in the crash of the waves. The dreams came more frequently now, vivid and insistent. I saw the ruins in greater detail, the carvings shifting and changing, the guardians circling in silence. I felt their sorrow, their patience, their hope that this time, humanity might finally listen. The community of believers grew, quietly but steadily. We shared stories, dreams, and warnings, building a tapestry of memory that stretched across continents. Some members reported new discoveries, carved stones found on distant beaches, strange artifacts dredged up by storms, even fleeting glimpses of the guardians themselves. Each new piece added to the puzzle, deepening our understanding and our sense of responsibility. The scientist and I remained in close contact, our conversations now tinged with urgency. She had begun to see patterns in the chaos, cycles of warning and forgetting that echoed through history. Every time a civilization rises, the guardians try to warn us, she said. Sometimes we listen, but more often we forget. The cycle repeats, and the ocean remembers. Her words haunted me. I began to see the cycle everywhere, in the rise and fall of empires, in the stories of lost cities, in the myths of floods and monsters and gods who lived beneath the waves. The guardians were not just protectors of the trench, they were keepers of memory, trying to teach us, to help us break free from the endless repetition of our own mistakes. One night, as a storm raged outside, I dreamed of the pilot again. He stood at the edge of the ruins, the stone in his hand, his eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "It's not too late," he said. "You can still choose. You can still remember." I woke with a sense of purpose, a conviction that I could not ignore. I gathered my notes, my stones, my memories, and began to write in earnest. I wrote for those who would listen, for those who dreamed of darkness, for those who felt the pull of the abyss. I wrote of the guardians, of the cycles, of the hope that this time, things might be different. The story spread, carried by whispers and dreams, by the quiet determination of those who refused to forget. More people came forward, sharing their own encounters, their own memories, their own warnings. The network grew stronger, a web of memory and hope stretching across the world. But not everyone welcomed the truth. There were those who sought to exploit the secrets of the deep, to plunder the ruins, to harness the power of the guardians for their own ends. We heard rumors of secret expeditions, of governments and corporations racing to unlock the mysteries of the trench. The scientist and I watched with growing dread, knowing that the cycle was reaching its turning point. One evening, as the sun set over a stormy sea, I stood on the shore, the stones in my hand, and made a promise to remember, to warn, to do everything in my power to help humanity choose a different path. I knew the guardians were watching, waiting, hoping that this time, we would listen. The ocean roared, wild and untamed, the memories of the deep swirling just beneath the surface. The cycle was not yet broken, but the story was not over. There was still time to remember, to change, to choose hope over fear, memory over forgetting. As darkness fell, I felt a presence beside me, a sense of connection, of understanding, of shared purpose. The guardians were near, their eyes watching from the depths, their memories woven into the fabric of the world. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the sound of the waves carry their message. Remember. Learn. Choose. The abyss was waiting, patient and eternal, its secrets guarded by those who remembered. And I would do my part, however small, to keep the memory alive. The world seemed to hold its breath as the ocean's mysteries pressed ever closer to the surface. The storms grew fiercer, the tides more unpredictable, and the stories stranger. Fishermen spoke of voices in the fog, of lights that danced beneath the waves, of shadows that moved with purpose and intelligence. Some coastal towns began to hold quiet vigils, lighting lanterns and casting them out to sea, hoping to appease whatever watched from the deep. The old myths returned, whispered in the dark, warnings, prayers, and promises to remember. The community of believers, once scattered and secretive, became a lifeline for many. We shared news, dreams, and warnings, piecing together the signs that the cycle was nearing its climax. The scientist and I worked tirelessly, analyzing new discoveries, decoding patterns, and urging caution. We knew that the guardians were watching, that the choices humanity made in the coming days would echo for generations. One morning, I awoke to find the stone on my desk glowing faintly, its patterns shifting in the early light. I felt a surge of fear and hope, a sense that the guardians were reaching out, trying to communicate. I traced the carvings with my fingers, feeling a pulse of energy, a memory not my own. Images flashed through my mind, ruins crumbling beneath the waves, cities swallowed by the sea, creatures mourning the loss of worlds that had forgotten their warnings. I wrote down everything I saw, desperate to capture the message before it faded. The scientist called, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's happening," she said. "The guardians are trying to help us remember. We have to share what we know, now, before it's too late." We coordinated with the community, spreading the message as far and wide as we could. We urged people to listen to the ocean, to respect its power, to remember the stories of the past. We warned of the dangers of greed, of the cost of forgetting, of the hope that could be found in memory and humility. The response was overwhelming. People from every corner of the world reached out, sharing their own dreams, their own stones, their own encounters with the deep. Some dismissed us as fools, but many listened, drawn by the same sense of urgency, the same longing to understand. The network grew stronger, a web of memory and hope stretching across continents and oceans. But the forces of exploitation were relentless. News broke of a massive expedition, funded by a coalition of governments and corporations, preparing to descend into the trench with technology more advanced than anything before. Their goal was not understanding, but control, mining the ruins, capturing the Guardians, unlocking the secrets of the abyss for profit and power. The scientist and I watched in horror as the world cheered the expedition, blind to the warnings, deaf to the memories of the deep. We did everything we could to stop them, petitions, protests, desperate messages to those in power, but it was not enough. The cycle was repeating, as it always had, driven by curiosity and greed. The day the expedition launched, the ocean was eerily calm. The world watched as the ships disappeared over the horizon, as the subs began their descent, as the cameras streamed images of the trench to millions of eager viewers. The ruins appeared on screen, the carvings glowing in the artificial light, the Guardians circling in the darkness. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan. The subs collected samples, mapped the ruins, captured footage of the Guardians. But then, the warnings began: strange malfunctions, equipment failing, voices echoing through the comms, shapes moving just beyond the lights. The scientists on board grew uneasy, their excitement turning to fear. And then, silence. The feed went dark, the ships stopped responding, the world held its breath. Rescue missions found only empty vessels, abandoned equipment, no sign of the crew. The ocean had claimed them, as it had so many before. The headlines screamed of disaster, of tragedy, of the dangers of the deep. But those of us who remembered knew the truth. The Guardians had given their warning, and it had been ignored. The cycle had turned once more. I stood on the shore that night, the stones in my hand, the ocean roaring at my feet. I felt the presence of the Guardians, their eyes watching, their memories woven into the waves. I made a promise to remember, to warn, to keep the story alive for as long as I could. The abyss was patient. The Guardians would wait. And maybe, someday, humanity would finally listen. The world mourned the loss of the expedition, but soon, as always, the headlines faded. Life on the surface returned to its routines, but beneath the calm, something had changed. The ocean felt different, older, wiser, and somehow more alive. Those of us who had listened, who had dreamed, who had carried the memory of the abyss, felt the shift most of all. The Guardians were still there, patient and watchful, their warnings echoing in the tides and storms. I spent my days walking the shore, the stones in my pocket a constant reminder of everything I had seen and everything I had learned. Sometimes, I would find others like me, strangers who recognized the patterns, who spoke in hushed tones of dreams and memories, who watched the horizon with the same mixture of fear and hope. We shared our stories, our warnings, our promises to remember. We became a quiet brotherhood, bound not by blood, but by the memory of the deep. The scientist and I continued our work, though the world seemed less willing to listen. We published what we could, sent messages to those who would hear, and kept the network alive. The community endured, a web of memory and warning stretching across the globe. We knew that the cycle would turn again, that the Guardians would wait, that the abyss would keep its secrets until the world was ready to listen. The dreams never left me. Some nights, I would find myself drifting through the ruins, the carvings glowing with blue light, the Guardians circling in silence. I felt their sorrow, their patience, their hope. I saw flashes of futures that might be worlds where humanity remembered, where the cycle was broken, where the ocean's warnings were heeded and the Guardians could finally rest. Other nights, the dreams were darker. I saw cities swallowed by the sea, civilizations lost to greed and forgetfulness, the guardians mourning in the depths. I woke with the taste of salt on my tongue, my heart pounding, the weight of memory heavy on my soul. But always, I remembered the promise I had made, to remember, to warn, to keep the story alive. I wrote every day, filling pages with memories, with dreams, with the lessons of the abyss. I spoke to anyone who would listen, shared the stones with those who understood, and watched the horizon for signs that the world was ready to change. One evening, as the sun set over a calm sea, I stood at the water's edge, the stones warm in my hand. The sky blazed with color, the waves whispered secrets, and for a moment, I felt the presence of the guardians all around me, watching, waiting, hoping. I closed my eyes and listened, letting their memories wash over me, letting their warnings settle in my heart. I knew then that the story would never truly end. The abyss would always be there, deep and mysterious, its secrets guarded by those who remembered. The guardians would wait, patient and eternal, their eyes watching from the darkness, their memories woven into the fabric of the world. And I would do my part, however small, to keep the memory alive, to share the story, to warn those who would listen, to honor the promise I had made in the heart of the trench. For as long as I lived, I would remember. For as long as the ocean endured, the guardians would watch. And maybe, someday, the world would finally hear the message carried by the waves. The unseen abyss would remain, a place of danger and wonder, of memory and warning, of hope and fear. And as long as there were those who remembered, the cycle would not be in vain.